Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the AI Monetization Podcast. I'm Binny, the co-founder of Project Pro. We help enterprises release AI projects faster. On this podcast, we meet with AI leaders to discuss what business outcomes they are seeing inside enterprises with AI. Today, we're honored to have Sadid Hasan. Sadid is the AI lead in the Advanced Capability Development and Acceleration team at Microsoft, where Sadid and his team, work on Office 365 and all the Azure Co-pilots we have been hearing about being released recently. Previously, he was the executive director of AI at CVS Health, and before that, he spent many years at Philips as a senior scientist, technical lead in their AI group, focused on a lot of healthcare related NLP and image recognition related tasks. Sadid is also part of multiple panels and review communities, including on the Harvard Business Review panel, the MIT Tech Review panel, the International Olympiad in AI. And he has over 100 publications in top NLP conferences, 31 patents, and about 30 patents pending. Sadid, welcome to this. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Binny, for the kind intro. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. We all kind of hear and use the work that you do, which is on the Copilots, and we are all aware of the code generating Microsoft Copilot through GitHub. What other Copilots are you seeing the most usage and demand for inside enterprises?
Yeah, sure. South this you already mentioned, right? So I've been working on and leading the Office M365 Copilots. So it's
Yeah.
like all the legacy Office apps that we have
Hmm.
as part of the Microsoft AI Development and Acceleration Program.
Hmm.
So working with, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Forms, Loop is a new Copilot, a new product that we're building that connects the dots and the collaborative between different other M365 Copilot apps. So
Hmm.
these are all those legacy apps where you know if you just take Word, traditionally it's been there for a long time. So and this generative AI is also not new. There was previously, the completion of words, phrases, and sentences that is already there. Now it's like more advanced in terms of, when we are building these copilots that you
Hmm.
can summarize your documents very quickly, coming up with, answer your questions,
Hmm.
anything you want from the Word. Then if you think about Excel, you can do data analysis, coming up with visualizations, ask questions, give your commands. So things, for example, there are so many features in these legacy apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint that people may not be familiar with.
Hmm.
So you can ask the Copilot, to do small things for you to, change colors and things like that, build slides. If you think about the PowerPoint from a theme, so we recently released Narrative Builder, this week
Hmm.
in Ignite. So that also, kind of give you the option to come up with an outline, and from that it can, create presentation for you if you're using PowerPoint Copilot. Few months
Hmm.
back, we released the Forms Copilot. So that's one of the copilots that we built from scratch.
Hmm.
And we have been working with the Forms team, since early 2023. So that is
Hmm.
one of the highest used copilots, where if you use Microsoft Forms, um, it's just, if you can just use a prompt and then it can generate, questions for you in forms of surveys, quizzes, because previously you have to, create those questions by yourself. Now,
Yeah.
it's given as post in productivity.
Right.
The educators, students, or anyone,
Yeah.
in the industry and academia, they
Yeah.
can use these tools to come up with those questions very quickly.
Right. And you're saying that apart from the code copilots, the forms copilots are among the most popularly used to generate quizzes and questions, you said?
Yes, one of the most, and of course, the other copilots, as I mentioned, Word, Excel, PowerPoint,
Yeah.
70% of the Fortune 500
Hmm.
companies are already using all
Yeah.
these copilots.
Hmm.
So we are seeing growth, since the last year.
Yeah.
We launched this, it's been a while. Now people are using it. It's all about like getting out of the value and how we are, continuously improving based
Hmm.
on the feedback, because of course, it's not a done deal yet, right? So there are lots
Hmm.
of opportunities to improve as well.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
we are seeing, people are using it, all these copilots more and more.
Yeah. And as you roll out these Copilot, Sadid, and the Copilots, and there's probably agentic systems around it coming up soon, and all that. What do you think fundamentally is going to happen to the nature of work that we all do inside offices? How is that going to change? What do you see happening? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. So the main idea is, we are trying to empower everyone, right?
Mm,
In the planet to use and get value out of these tools, these legacy apps. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all these legacy apps, forms, Loop, people have been using, it's for a while. Um, Now the Copilot is basically boosting their productivity in a
mhm,
way that, they don't have to search for specific features. Rather, through the generic question answering interface, the chat pen that we, think about, through that they could, you know, give commands and ask queries and things like that, whatever they want to
mhm,
do,
mhm,
that can help them, to go through the drudgeries, the of work, right? So it's kind of empowering all of them, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
so imagine that would actually uplift everyone. So
mhm,
people, let's say, I remember that, 3 decades ago when or three, or I guess it's now 3, 4 decades ago. So when I started learning how to use Word, right? So what are the different features, how to create a new file, how to create a new document, and even within that, right? So creative writing, um, it takes time, right? So,
mhm,
uh, and even before, right, when I joined in the industry or even before in the academia, I
mhm,
used to, if you think about PowerPoint, right? So for any presentation that is coming up, so I used to spend a long time in terms of thinking about the content, right?
yeah,
And thinking about, how to design, make
mhm,
it a good story, and formatting, right? It used to take a lot of time, right?
yeah,
For
yeah,
creating some slides, right?
mhm,
So nowadays, it became so easy that you basically share your thoughts that, okay, this is the topic I want to present. This should
mhm,
be the outline that I'm looking at.
mhm,
And then, you can generate the slides right away. And then you
yeah,
can continue editing it, by
mhm,
asking questions and interacting with the Copilot, right? So that, it's a huge productivity boost,
yeah,
in terms of like, you don't need to have that much prep time. You are always ready, more or less, right? So if you want to present
yeah.
impromptu, so it should be easy for you now.
Right, right. Makes sense. And for enterprises that are adopting AI for use cases, right? What guidance do you have to the CIOs and CTOs to, avoid the shiny object kind of syndrome and focus on ROI and think? What guidance do you have for people implementing AI use cases like that?
Yeah, so definitely, there has to be planning and, and thinking about strategy
Mm,
where, most of the time are spent, right, in terms of, their org. Um, so if you think about all these copilots that we just talked about, if in an organization people are using it, all of them at scale, so they have to think about like when or how much, productivity boost can happen, right? And we actually made it also easier. This week we had one solution that we released that's called Copilot Analytics.
I see.
So that actually helps you also track the Copilot usage,
Hmm.
adoption, um, and various metrics that are included. So the decision makers, they can
Hmm.
analyze very easily that,
Hmm.
how the people are using it, and what's the downstream impact, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
think about, the Outlook Copilot also as part of
Mhm.
this, right? So that um, that can also write up, email replies for you and things like
Yeah.
that,
Mhm.
um, or even, Word or PowerPoint slides. So based on the Copilot's output, how many times it's saving, and also how much interaction is going on in terms of updating it and reiterating on this, and once that is done,
Mhm.
what is happening in the downstream way, right? So if the Copilot generated summary or the answers or the slides are being used and being presented and things like that. So
Mhm.
all those impact can be tracked and
Mhm.
measured.
Mhm.
um, so in that sense, my advice would be, of course, do detailed planning,
Mhm.
um, and using these tools, and starting with, kind of familiarity of, how to use these tools. So there are also, training materials available online, because some
Yeah.
people also, they might not see value in terms of like how to ask the questions, how to get the best out of these copilots, because these are all large language models.
Yeah.
So we also have, we are also making it easy for them by, if they ask a question, and the Copilot can also help with the suggestions and things like
Mhm.
that. Okay, these are
Mhm.
some of the things that you can ask me,
Mhm.
and helping with, pre-generated prompts that people can
Yeah.
easily use and get the best output.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. And you've been a NLP researcher for a very long time, lots of patents, lots of high quality work you've contributed to the field, right? So then what, yeah, and when we see LLMs and GenAI, it almost seems as if NLP is solved, but clearly it's not. What are the unsolved important problems in NLP today?
Yeah, definitely. It's I can speak for hours in this. Definitely, it's not solved, right? So it's the last mile problem, right?
Mm,
So the idea is, you'd see, uh, with these tools, with generative AI, as I mentioned before, is, empowering everyone, right, to do more with less, meaning
mm,
you can interact with this system. So the level 1 and 2 is kind of achieved in terms of conversation, right? So people couldn't imagine that this kind of conversation would be possible.
mm,
So fluent, coherent conversations, some AI system is able to actually understand what you mean when you
mm,
ask some questions or you give some tasks,
mm,
and pretty good, because in a very good way, because these models are trained, on huge amount of data, so
yeah,
they are pretty knowledgeable
mm,
on various topics, right?
yeah,
That as a human, we are good at. But if you think about the main issue here is that, um, these models are trained on large amount of data, so it's like they're generated by millions of humans, right?
mm,
So these are, all web data curated by humans,
mm,
everything that is publicly available. So
mm,
that includes the brain power of, millions or billions of users or
mm,
humans. And since, the beginning of time, and who knows like how far some of the black box models are using the
mm,
data from, right? We know that, they're until very recently. Uh, Now, these models are also not only learning from the strengths of humans, but also from
mm,
the limitations of humans, right? So
yeah,
everything is there. So how do you judge? So how do you know that the the data is being trained on is good
mm,
data, right? Who is the
mm,
judge here, right? So
mm,
so that's where subjectivity comes in play, and that's where some sort of variations and randomness and those kind of aspects come into play in terms of responses that are being
mm,
generated.
mm,
So but you get pretty good outcome, 80% or 90% of the time.
mm,
um, but closing the last mile, right? So that's, there are so many, even corner cases. um, so the model might be able to tell you what it experienced before based on this data,
yeah,
but can it, solve the unsolved or completely unseen problem?
mm,
Um, so that those are the areas that still needs to improve, right? So the
yeah,
conversation is improved. Now we are trying to do more with, very complex tasks that needs planning and reasoning. So that is also, with the new GPT-o1 models, we have seen that is also improved in terms of, using some sort of self-reflection and thought process that would increase the latency, but, before generating or giving the output directly to the user, it reflects and thinks about it and analyzes more, so that the final answer is better. So those areas are, coming up, but then more towards innovation, imagination, organization, doing things autonomously. So that's the agentic framework and the agent-based push that we're trying to, come up with right now. But that would take a while to figure out that infrastructure and framework, and when to need when do you need those kind of complex architectures versus simple models, right? So that's also kind of an optimization problem.
And since you're talking about the last mile, there's probably no other industry where last mile is so important, like healthcare and medical, and you have a lot of experience in that space, right? Could you maybe help us understand the spectrum of possible AI use cases in healthcare and some of your favorite applications of AI in healthcare?
Yeah, definitely. Healthcare obviously is one of the, highest impactful area based on AI and specifically generative AI. So, in the past decade, I have worked on various use cases like, automated report generation, clinical decision support, diagnosis inference, paraphrase generation. So there are many use cases. So that would help the clinicians, not much spending time on admin work, rather, focus more on the patients, because obviously that's more important, to make sure that the treatment plan is working, and the patient, they are, comfortable about, the things that they're, going through. So, now think about, let's pick some of the use cases like, clinical documentation, right? So definitely that is one of the area that can, be, developed so much using generative AI. And some of the things, some of the solutions that we also have released as part of the Nuances, GenAI platform. So that also showed that it improves a lot of time, from the clinicians in terms of documentation. So because healthcare is challenging because it has so many different types of modalities of data, right? Like imaging, then the patient history, and structured data, unstructured clinical notes that from the past, from the patient history, and structured way of collecting data from devices, right? In terms of their vital signs and demographics and things like that. There is also lots of assessment type of data, right? The clinicians, in US, they're part of different insurance companies, so there are lots of insurance claims data, and the insurance companies, they also, for elderly patients, they go there to their home with a series of assessment questions to learn more about their health. So there is also assessment type of data with question answering format. So there are lots of these modalities. So how do you integrate all these data into a platform where, you have a multimodal generative AI model that can make sense of all those pieces and connect the dots, and should be able to come up with, a treatment plan or, diagnosis, inference, or coming up with a note pretty quickly, right? So that's, tremendous use case. And the other use case I want to highlight is, paraphrasing and things like that. Paraphrasing meaning like, how do you simplify the note, right? So these notes are generated when the patient is in the hospital, let's say in ICU or emergency rooms, and then when they're discharged, the note is, it's a huge long text that describes like what the patient went through and what is the treatment plan, and what needs to be taken care of. So but the patient, do they understand? So I did some research, it's been a while now,
Mm-hmm.
that showed that many people are not adherent to their treatment plan simply because
Yeah,
they don't understand why that plan is being recommended.
makes
And
sense.
these are like complex clinical, text and jargon. So generative AI can help a lot in that, in terms of simplifying those terminologies in a way that patients can understand. And if they
Mm-hmm.
understand, they would be more adherent to their treatment plan, and that would
Mm-hmm.
improve their health outcomes. So that's a tremendous use case, I would say.
Got it. Got it. That's a pretty valuable spectrum of use cases, Sadid. So, in most of these healthcare use cases, right? How often do the base foundation models like a GPT and all that, how often are they sufficient? And in what kind of use cases would you need very medical specific models? Like, and do you have any guidance on that?
Yeah, so definitely, these models that we have seen, right? Like
Hmm.
GPT-based models that are trained on all domains, all modalities of data right now, including define not only healthcare but also other domains like financial and open domain.
Yeah.
So uh, it's basically a matter of experiments. It's true that some of the things are very specific to different clinical institutions,
Hmm.
but obviously, that's the difference between, do you want to train a fully medical model um, from scratch based on your institution data and
Hmm.
also, clinical knowledge versus, training a model from open domain and then fine tuning. So, in my experience, I've seen that pre-training on, open domain and then transferring to medical domain, that would
Yeah.
help in terms of transferring the learnings from
Hmm.
the general domain to specific domain, and
Hmm.
that would help in use cases like I mentioned before, in terms of simplifying the text, right?
Hmm.
So things like that, because you need to really understand also the common people layman terminology to be
Yeah.
able to relate the two.
Hmm.
And some other use cases like that is fully clinical specific, where you are the clinician is basically looking for a second opinion, right, on what is exactly going on with the patient's health.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in those scenarios, and again, I didn't do this experiment personally yet, but
Hmm.
uh, there are lots of literature available, so that can also suggest that if you have a fully medically trained model on the medical domain knowledge, that might take an edge on those cases where there is not much noise from the
Yeah.
general domain, rather
Hmm.
everything is coming from the medical domain.
I see.
But again, you need a huge amount of data, right? So
Hmm.
that's another challenge in healthcare, is that it's sensitive data, right? So
Right.
many of those data is private, and so therefore, uh, being able to collect that much data specific to healthcare might be challenging, right? So that's where, if you have less amount of data,
Hmm.
that is ground truth and real data, you can
Hmm.
use them to generate lots of synthetic data using
Hmm.
some sort of general purpose trained models, and then you can use that synthetic data augmented with the real data specific to
Hmm.
healthcare to train a medically specific model, right?
Hmm.
So there is all these different options that people need to experiment on.
Hmm.
But as I mentioned, right, so the data is the challenge, right? Because
Hmm.
general domain data is it's a lot available,
Yeah.
and medical domain there is not a lot. So
Hmm. Makes sense. And you've done a fair amount of work when it comes to learning and education. What like you're part of associated with LinkedIn Learning and things like that. So, what kind of impact do you see AI in just education and learning with customization and interactivity going up and things like that? How do you think that's going to impact?
yeah, definitely, generative AI has a lot of potential in education sector, right? In terms of like, if you think about just the tutoring system, right? So um, if you don't use generative AI, right, just traditional tutors, right? So if you need so I used to have, tutors, let's say back 3-4 decades back in different domains, right? So human tutors, right? So my teachers in expert in different domains, right? So with generative AI, this is helping students to learn, seamlessly whenever you need 24/7 tutor, right? So whatever question you might ask, it should be able to, come up with a reasonable answer, um, and also explain, right? So sometimes in terms of explainability, I would say that's a huge impact, because many of those terminologies, let's say in the STEM domain, right? You you may not have enough opportunity to learn, and within a classroom environment where there are lots of students and everyone has a different learning rate, right? So in that teacher classroom scenario, you may have many questions unanswered, right? So this kind of copilots and tutoring systems that are based on generative AI, that can help alleviate that gap, where people can ask any questions and try to understand the concepts very very easily. So that's from the student perspective, and also from the teacher's perspective, right? So people, I know, I've been also in the academia before. It takes a while to come up with the assessment questions, to teach and create teaching materials like slides and things like that. So all those could be also done now using generative AI. People can, I've seen, people started using the Forms Copilot now to create quizzes, the educators and teachers. Um, so that from their side, it would be also a huge boost in terms of productivity, so they can focus on the students, to have some, more interactive, meaningful learning experience. Now, in terms of the other part of the puzzle is like, um, the plagiarism and things like that, how to control them, right? So all those parts. So I feel like, the education sector can use generative AI in a more meaningful way, in terms of coming up with problems that requires more planning and reasoning and complex, problem solving, and how to use copilots and into coming up with responses, and use the strengths of the generative AI models and the limitations. So for example, if there is something new that is happening right now, um, people can connect search engines on top of these copilots to get the most recent information. But for a completely new idea or new domain, how do you use copilots as a second opinion to problem solve those? So imagine it's kind of open book exam that we used to have, in the past, right? So you have a book open, but the questions are designed in a way that even if you have the book, you still have to think critically to be able to, answer those questions.
Yeah, no, so that makes a lot of sense on how powerful education could be customized, almost like you said, a personal AI coach slash tutor for every student out there. The other thing I was curious about is I noticed on LinkedIn that you've done a session on metadata and AI. Right? I'm just curious, what implications do you see for metadata inside an enterprise with AI? And if you could just define the problem and how AI could help solve that, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, so metadata is obviously, that's the added part, right? So, it's data about data, right? So
Mhm.
as I mentioned before, right, many of these models, right, so they're trained on open domain, general domain data sets.
Yeah.
So now if you want to use it in the enterprise use cases, right, so some of the copilots that I have talked about, um, you basically need to think that, or actually realize that the model is not equal to product, right? So that's the idea here. Model has its own limitations. So you have to do a lot more when you have to, come up with a product based on, these kind of powerful models, because these models are even, you know, there is that alignment piece, right, with reinforcement learning, with human feedback, lots of supervised, you know, uh, data points, right? Ground truths are included for supervised fine tuning once the pre-training is done. But yet that may not be enough, because obviously you need to have the guardrails on top of it to make sure that the models are following responsible AI principles. Nothing is getting harmful as input, and not, is not coming any output
Mhm.
as harmful. So all those can be also determined and enhanced by more metadata, which is like enterprise specific, learning more about the users, like what they actually want. So the key here is that understanding the intent of the users, right?
Mhm.
So that is huge, because, you know, obviously if you think about human to human communication, right? So it's so challenging. The whole world is running on communications. So
Mhm.
is understanding each other, right?
Mhm.
So how the model knows what exactly the user is asking, right? So that's why you need to give a lot of context, right? So if you
Mhm.
write a prompt that includes lots of examples of what things you want, what things you don't want
Mhm.
in those cases, so that's why these models need lots of, detailed prompts that we
Yeah.
call system prompts that goes in the backend. But
Mhm.
users, they just ask, simple things in short form, but the product needs to understand what's the intent so that it can call the right prompt. And for those, detailed prompts, you need lots of metadata to understand real user intent. How do you
Mhm.
classify those intents in a way that you know which prompt to use at what point?
Mhm.
So yeah, so these are, very powerful ways of triggering and
Yeah.
making the best use of those, generative AI models.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And how do you stay in touch? I mean, there is so much happening on a daily basis, and you're working on the cutting edge of these technologies. What is your go-to destination? I mean, places to stay in touch with what's happening in AI?
Yeah, obviously, being part of Microsoft and part of my team in the AI acceleration, development program.
Yeah.
So that's obviously makes it easy
Hmm.
for some of those cases, because we have lots of, internal conferences and lots of internal avenues when, we share with each other what's going on,
Hmm.
what new things are coming up, where we can improve and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and externally, of course, the tools that we use, like you mentioned LinkedIn before, so many of those external tools and social media that also helps us a lot in terms of staying up to date. And thankfully, the recommender systems, right? So many of those, the first or most used AI use case across the world is the recommender system, right? So anything, anywhere you go, you get some recommendation if you want to buy something, or if you go to LinkedIn, your feed is revised every time based on your
Yeah.
interactions, your learnings and interests. So yes, those help a lot. As well as there are various avenues like deeplearning.ai newsletters that you can sign up to stay up to date.
Hmm. Okay, makes sense. And what career guidance do you have for people? Given that you started off as a researcher, all the way to senior AI lead inside Microsoft, working on cutting edge products like Copilot, what are some things that you did in your career that worked out well for you, and what guidance do you have for others listening in?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So my whole career is basically I try to um, learn, right,
Hmm.
and try to find opportunities where I can share my learnings and make use of those learnings and towards making an impact, right? So
Hmm.
basically that would be my advice, you know, um, if I was passionate about AI, decades ago, because that I was convinced that some of the things that we do as a human, we have our limitations, right? So how can we build machines who can work with us together so we can actually be more empowered into what we do, and make impact in each other's lives more, right? So and I was lucky and fortunate throughout this process where I have seen and used and learned through AI, machine learning, and natural language understanding. And that was my focus basically, because how to improve communication using natural language understanding and processing technologies. And through that I realized that if you see my career journey, that the healthcare is the one domain that is far behind in terms of AI adoption and things like that when I started in healthcare, because of obvious challenges in terms of data, privacy, and trust, and also responsibilities and things like that. How do you ensure that the AI solutions would be adopted, and how do you ensure that who is in control, who is responsible if there is a mistake being done by the AI models, right? So that led me to focus more on healthcare for a decade, and then I'm now part of the Microsoft's Advanced AI Development Acceleration Program. So that is basically also pursuing my passion for being in the forefront of state of the art in AI, and as well as pushing for more problem solving, more complex problem solving, and pushing for innovation, and not only with research but also how to integrate that into products so that people can actually use it and get benefited from it. So if you focus on the process, so that would be my advice to anyone listening to this. I throughout my career I didn't focus on that I need to get promoted, or I have to chase worldly materials or things. I focused on what I loved and where I saw that I could benefit and help others with some of these technologies, and I could come up with new ideas and team up with my colleagues and do problem solving and not focus on the outcome. Because if you love the process, right, if you love the process and if you forget and don't care about the outcome, the worldly outcomes in terms of what literally can you get personally, then only you would see you are basically really transitioning through your career, and that comes naturally, so you don't have to focus on it. You focus on problem solving and making others happy, because that's why we are social beings. That's why we are in this world, that so that we don't work in silos. We basically help each other, because everyone has their own strengths and limitations. So we have to leverage each other's strengths so that we can alleviate each other's limitations.
That's beautifully said. That's very inspirational, both career and life advice. Thanks for sharing that. And one final question, Sadid, is that you obviously mentor and build a fairly large AI team. What are some best practices that you use to lead and inspire and manage your team?
Yeah, good question. So my approach is kind of, people say that's kind of different and unique, in a sense that I don't see a difference in what I do. Okay, so I'm a people leader, as well as leading the science and technology within the org. So I see them both connected, right? Because my whole life I have been trying to find that how, as a human, we think, we do things, what things we do better, what things we can do better. So if you learn through that process, and that helps me a lot to find out how to use our own ways of doing things into machines, so that machine can also mimic those So that's the machine learning part, right? So the machine
Yeah.
learning, human learning, I see them, basically going hand in hand.
Okay.
So that makes my life easier, and my approach for leadership and problem solving, using machine learning algorithms, is I see them side by side. So I can bring analogies from ways we, communicate, we do things, and put it into perspective for how to solve the problems, and vice versa. So once you connect your passion with, the real life challenges of career progression and career growth, team building, ways of collaborating, to do this kind of problem solving, so we can understand more about each other. So it's all about, learning more about each other, and then how to apply those into the machines. So you have something that you can work together. That's a
Yeah.
common goal, shared goal in the team. And throughout this process, we know that the whole team, obviously, they have diverse perspectives and backgrounds. So how can we make sure that they have a common goal and a North Star for each of them? Because
Yeah.
each are coming from a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is to support them to reach their North Star. While doing that, we try to solve the problems and help each other, and make sure that that's aligned with, our priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Human machine collaboration that way. So, Sadid, this has been extremely helpful and insightful. Thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. Yeah, really appreciate having me.